I recognized him by the way he walked, hunched over, dragging his feet as if he carried the weight of his entire life on his back. Oh, child, the moment my eyes fell on that figure rummaging through torn bags and crushed cans, my world tilted on its axis. There I was, stepping out of the bank with a folder tucked under my arm. Nothing special, just some papers for my modest savings account, when I spotted him, leaning over a dumpster in that dingy alley across the street. His hands, once so strong and steady, now dirty and trembling as he separated scraps, stashing aluminum cans into an old sack slung over his shoulder. My heart stopped cold, like ice cracking in my chest. The whole bustling street seemed to shrink down to that one corner, the honks of cars fading into a distant hum. He was malnourished, his frame so thin it looked like the wind could blow him away. His beard overgrown and wild, white hair matted with grime, clothes stained and ragged, nothing like the man I'd known. And yet it was him, Thaddeus. The man who had once shared my bed, my table, my dreams. The one who'd promised forever in a voice full of warmth and certainty. I stood paralyzed on the sidewalk, my heels rooted to the pavement, unable to take a single step. Memories flooded me like a river bursting its banks. The day he left without a word, just a brief, cold letter on the kitchen table. It's for the best. That abandonment had shattered me inside for years. I went from rage, hot and burning, to contempt that poisoned my days, and finally to a sadness that lingered like a shadow, never fully lifting. And now, after all this time, decades really, life was handing him back to me like this, reduced to a can collector, invisible to the hurried folks passing by, their eyes sliding right over him as if he were part of the trash. I felt a wave of shame wash over me, not for him, but for my own thoughts. A part of me wanted to cross the street, pretend I hadn't seen, keep my past from tangling with this misery. But something stronger than pride, maybe love's stubborn echo or just plain human decency, pushed me forward. I took a step, then another. My heels clicked against the pavement, sharp in the quiet of my mind. He raised his head by instinct, those sunken eyes meeting mine. For a second, recognition flickered, then shock flashed across his weathered face. His hands trembled harder, dropping a can that clattered to the ground. He tried to back away, like I was a ghost come to collect an unpayable debt. "Is that you?" I asked, my voice a thin thread that didn't sound like mine, barely above a whisper. He lowered his gaze, ashamed, his shoulders slumping even more. "You shouldn't see me like this," he muttered, his words rough from disuse. "Forget it. Go on your way." But I couldn't. I didn't go on my way. I stood there in front of him, my heart pounding out of my chest like it might break free. Up close, the details hit me harder. The torn shoes with soles flapping loose, fingers cracked from the cold and endless digging, eyes sunken deep from hunger and who knows what else. Nothing about this man resembled the one I'd married, the respected engineer in crisp suits who spoke of construction projects with such passion, his eyes lighting up like stars. "Tell me, why are you living like this?" I demanded, no longer hiding the tremble in my voice. After everything that happened, after the years of wondering and hurting, I needed to know. He pressed his lips together, glancing around as if fearing someone might be listening. Cars passing, a distant siren, the rustle of wind through the alley. Then he shook his head slowly. "You should never have seen me again," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I did everything so you wouldn't have to carry this." I stepped closer, close enough to smell the stale sweat, the grit of the streets, the sharp tang of poverty that clung to him. "What did you do all this for, Thaddeus?" That was when he looked up, his eyes filling with tears that cut tracks through the dirt on his cheeks. He let out the sentence that split me in two. It was to save you." I felt like I was running out of air, my legs going weak beneath me. I grabbed his arm to steady myself, or maybe him, as he swayed. "Save me from what?" I begged, my voice breaking. He tried to stay on his feet, but his body betrayed him. No strength left in those once powerful limbs. He fainted right there in my arms, collapsing onto the dirty asphalt like an old tree finally giving way after too many storms. I screamed for help, my cry echoing off the buildings. A couple of passerbys approached, concern etched on their faces. We called an ambulance, the wail of sirens cutting through the air as I knelt beside him, holding his head in my lap, just like I used to when we were young and he'd catch a fever. His hair felt coarse under my fingers, his breathing shallow. I never thought I'd hold him like this again. Fragile, defeated, a shadow of the man I'd loved. In the ambulance, the paramedic checked him over, his tone professional but kind. "He's dehydrated, severe anemia, signs of chronic malnutrition," he said, glancing at me with sympathy. I could barely process the words. My mind stuck on that pale face and his whispered confession. It was to save you. At the hospital, they rushed him into the emergency room, machines beeping, nurses moving with quiet urgency. They told me he'd been spotted around the area before, sleeping in makeshift shelters, always refusing help. No ID on him, like he'd erased himself from the world. When he woke hours later, groggy and disoriented, I was still there, sitting in that hard plastic chair, my hands clasped tight. He said, "Leave," as soon as his eyes focused on me, his voice weak but insistent. "You never stopped belonging to me as part of my history," I replied, softly, leaning forward, "and I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth." He closed his eyes, seeming to wrestle with himself inside. Finally, with a broken voice, he murmured, "I didn't go broke because of bad decisions. I went broke because I obeyed." "Obeyed who?" I asked, my pulse quickening. He didn't answer, turning his head toward the wall, his silence heavier than any words could be. That night I slept, or tried to, sitting next to his gurney, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, still not grasping the full weight of what I was about to uncover. I thought back to our marriage, the unexplained arguments that had grown like weeds, his sudden flight, the legal papers that hit like dry blows afterwards, the ruin I'd endured alone, with debts piling up like mountains. I never understood. But now, something was shifting, like a door creaking open in the dark. At dawn, when he opened his eyes again, he looked at me with a deep sadness that pierced my soul. "Everything I lost so that you would stay alive. And even so, you hated me." I felt the terrible knot in my throat. "I didn't know anything," I replied, tears stinging. "I thought you'd betrayed me." A tear slid down his dirty cheek. "That was what I needed you to believe." In that instant, I knew I'd lived deceived for years. My resentment built on a carefully designed lie. The misery he endured wasn't chance, it was a hidden sacrifice. I didn't yet know who pulled the strings or what danger had stalked me, but inside, a fire ignited, the need to dig to the bottom of this truth. I caressed his hand slowly, feeling the rough skin. I told him, "Rest. This time you're not alone." As I watched him close his eyes under that harsh white light, I realized this reunion amidst trash and cans wasn't coincidence. It was the start of a truth that could destroy lives and change mine forever. He slept almost all the next day, sedated by the painkillers, his chest rising and falling with a ragged rhythm that tugged at my heart. I stayed by his side without really knowing why. Maybe it was the pull of old love, or just the certainty that if I walked away now, something vital would slip back into the shadows forever. As I watched him breathe, memories paraded through my mind uninvited, like a river breaking through old levees, flooding everything. I met Thaddeus when I was 28, back when life felt full of promise and my hands weren't yet worn from scrubbing other people's floors. He was a man brimming with plans, his words big and bold, his hands strong from building things that lasted. He'd work day and night on those engineering projects, sketching bridges and buildings on napkins at our kitchen table, but he always found time to look at me like I was his greatest creation. "Viret," he'd say, his voice warm like fresh coffee, "we'll have a stable future, a house of our own, trips to places we've only read about, peace of mind." And for many years, he delivered on that. We weren't rich, no grand vacations or fancy cars, but we were happy in our quiet way. I'd sew curtains from bargain fabric, manage the house with careful hands, stretch every dollar like it was elastic. He'd build shelves, fix leaks, dream aloud about the next big contract that would set us right. Our marriage wasn't perfect, mind you. There were arguments that simmered like pots left too long in the stove. Over money, over his late nights at work, over the small wounds that pile up and never quite heal. Long silences where we'd sit across from each other at dinner, the clink of forks the only sound. But I never imagined the end would come as it did. Cold, without a shout or a slammed door, without even a word to let me grasp it. One morning, he simply didn't come back from work. 2 days dragged by with no news. I paced our little living room, the floorboards creaking under my feet, calling the precinct, the hospitals, his office. Nobody knew a thing. On the 3rd day, a lawyer showed up at my door, his suit too sharp for our neighborhood, handing me a sealed envelope. Inside, a brief note in Thaddeus's familiar handwriting. "Forgive me. It's for the best. Don't try to look for me anymore." That was the day my world cracked open from the inside. For weeks, I called numbers that rang into emptiness, wrote letters that vanished like smoke. His phone ceased to exist. No one answered my pleas. And little by little, the blows kept coming. Debts I didn't know about surfacing like weeds. Accounts emptied overnight. Properties foreclosed with cold efficiency. Legal papers arrived one after another, like poisonous rain soaking through my life. In less than 6 months, I'd lost it all. My husband, my stability, our home with its familiar scent of wood polish and his aftershave. I was forced to pack what little I could into boxes and move into a small rented room that smelled of damp and strangers' lives. Starting over at 47 with hands that shook when I signed job applications. People looked at me with pity, their eyes soft but distant, or with suspicion, whispering behind cupped hands. Some even blamed me outright. "You must have done something," they'd say, their voices laced with that false sympathy. I let them talk because I didn't understand it myself. How could I defend against shadows? For years, I hated him with a fire that kept me warm on cold nights. Hated him for vanishing without explanation, for leaving me to face the shame alone, the creditors knocking with their insistent raps, the memories that haunted like ghosts. I hated him for not fighting, for not showing his face, for disappearing as if our shared life had been a mistake he needed to erase with one swift cut. That night in the hospital, sitting next to his bed with the steady beep of monitors filling the air, that hate began to crack for the first time, like ice thawing under a reluctant sun. When he woke again, his eyes fluttering open in the dim light, I asked the nurses to give us privacy. I closed the door with a soft click, the sound echoing in my chest. Thaddeus looked at me with exhaustion etched deep, his eyes no longer the bright ones I'd fallen for, but broken by something heavier than just the streets. "Tell me everything," I said bluntly, my voice steady despite the storm inside. He stayed silent for what felt like an eternity, his breathing heavy, labored, like each inhale cost him. Finally, he spoke, his words tumbling out slow and pained. The day I disappeared, that same day I was supposed to die. I felt like my chest was exploding, air trapped in my lungs. "How can you say that?" I whispered, gripping the bed rail. "Because that was what I was ordered to do, and I chose something else." I stared at him, not understanding, the room spinning a little. "Who gave you that order?"
He swallowed hard, his throat working visibly. Dangerous people, Verrett. Very dangerous people. Everything in his face rang true. Not the loud, shouting kind, but the heavy, weighing kind that settles in your bones. He went on, his voice gaining a fragile strength. The day I disappeared, that same day I was accused of fraud I didn't commit, a project where I only signed documents they forced me on. When I wanted to report it, they showed me false evidence, bought witnesses, and a photograph of you coming out of our building. A chill raced through me, cold as winter rain. They told me that if I spoke, if I tried to clear my name, you would pay the price. The words sliced like knives, sharp and deep. "And that's why you ran?" I asked, my voice thin. "I didn't run," he replied, bitterly, a ghost of a bitter smile on his lips. "I erased myself." He explained then, in halting sentences, how he'd accepted the blame for a guilt that wasn't his, signed agreements under duress, handed over assets we'd built together, let our accounts drain dry so no one would question his supposed fall of grace, all to keep those men from turning their eyes on me. "You had to hate me," he said, his hand twitching as if to reach for mine. "It was the only way you wouldn't suspect, wouldn't dig." I cried in silence, squeezing my hands together until my knuckles whitened, fighting not to shatter. All these years, everything I suffered, it was to protect me? "To save your life," he replied, simply, his eyes meeting mine at last. I covered my mouth with my hand, stifling a sob. 40 years of resentment crumbled in that moment, leaving a painful void where anger had lived. And what knew he, if he only hugended at the things that happened? That night, I didn't sleep. I wandered the hospital corridors aimlessly, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, my mind rewriting our entire history. The hate, the abandonment, the ruin, it had all been threads in the same web of control, spun to keep me blind. The next morning, I returned to his bed with a new fire in my step. I told him, "You know, I can't unhear this now. I'm not the scared woman I was before." He looked at me with worry clouding his eyes. "Don't dig up the past," he begged, his voice frail. "The past kills." "Silence does too," I replied, evenly, "and I've been silent for too many years." He tried to sit up, wincing at the effort. "If I talk, if you talk, they will come." "Let them come," I said, no tremble in my words. "This time, you won't be alone." For the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for me. "You don't know who you're messing with," he murmured. "You didn't know how many years of life you were stealing from me with your silence either," I countered gently. He pressed his lips together, tears slipping silent down his cheeks. That same day, strange people began appearing at the hospital. Men who didn't look like family, asking about beds that didn't exist, watching from afar with eyes too sharp. Thaddeus grabbed my hand in desperation, his grip surprisingly strong. "They've already started," he whispered. I looked at him with the calm of someone who'd lost too much to flinch. Then the end of the story has started too. Because if he'd become a ghost to save me, I was now ready to become the woman who'd bring him back and make those who destroyed us pay.
The shadows of the hospital no longer seemed peaceful to me. Every hallway held an unanswered question, every unknown face a possible threat. Since Thaddeus's confession, my world had shifted irrevocably. I wasn't just the woman who'd stumbled upon her ex-husband in his misery anymore. Now I was woven into a tale of fear, invisible men pulling strings, silences bought with ruin and despair. That night, while he slept fitfully, his breaths shallow and uneven, I retreated to the waiting room, my head burning with thoughts I couldn't quiet. The vinyl chairs creaked under me, the faint smell of antiseptic hanging in the air like a constant reminder of fragility. I replayed everything I'd endured after his disappearance. The debts that had drowned me like rising floodwaters, the shame of knocking on doors for help, the pitying looks from folks who'd once envied our quiet happiness, believing I'd been left through some fault of my own.
Every memory took on a darker hue now. It had all been a carefully staged play to shield me, and I'd been the unwitting lead, blind to the script. At dawn, I returned to his room, the first light filtering through the blinds in thin stripes. Thaddeus stirred as I brought him a cup of water, his lips cracked and dry. He looked at me as if half expecting I'd vanished, as if his truth had been too heavy and scared me off. "I'm still here," I said softly, helping him sip. He nodded with a flicker of relief, the cup trembling in his grasp. We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the hospital machines a steady backdrop, until I broke it. "I want the names," I said, my tone firm. "It's not enough to glimpse the past anymore. I need to know who destroyed you, who destroyed us." He closed his eyes, his hand gripping the sheet so tight his knuckles paled. "Not all names are said out loud," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Some are pronounced only once, and then they cost you your life." Mine was already in danger without me knowing, I countered, leaning closer. "You won't carry this alone anymore." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "It all started with a big project," he began, his words measured, like each one pained him. "A multi-million-dollar public works contract. I was just the technical lead, nothing more. But the contracts, they were riddled with traps, ghost companies, inflated invoices, funds diverted like water through hidden channels." His voice broke a little, and he paused, staring at the ceiling as if seeing it all again. "When I discovered it, I thought I should report it. Foolish, maybe, but right." That same night, he said the first threat came. A knock at our door after dark, a voice on the phone that chilled him. He explained how he'd thought he could escape it at first, pay a little, resign quietly, fade away. But they didn't want mere silence. They craved a scapegoat, a clean name to smear with their dirt. And he, with his spotless record and position, was perfect. When they saw I wouldn't cave, they brought you into it. My stomach twisted tight. "Me?" He showed me photographs, he said, his voice dropping. "You entering and leaving our building, your schedules, routes you took alone. Places where an accident could happen so easily." He brought a hand to his chest, as if the memory still pressed there. I remembered those days vaguely, times I'd felt eyes on my back, a prickle on my neck for no reason. I'd shrugged it off as nerves. Now it hit like truth. "That was when I accepted," he whispered. "I signed everything, handed over what we had, left without a goodbye. You had to hate me, so you wouldn't search, so they'd know the blackmail held." I cried quietly, tears warm on my cheeks. And everything they took from us, the accounts, the house, part of the price. It had to look real, like I'd lost it all through my own mistakes. "And you did lose it," I said, my voice edged with sorrow. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Because when a monster tastes what it can take, it's never satisfied." He tried to say more, but a coughing fit seized him, harsh and racking, his body curling in on itself. I called the nurse, her footsteps quick on the linoleum. As she tended to him, adjusting his IV with efficient hands, I caught sight from the corner of my eye, a man in the hallway, lingering too long, his gaze too intent to be a worried relative. Our eyes met briefly, and he turned away sharply, vanishing down the corridor. Fear washed over me like a cold wave, prickling my skin. That afternoon, a doctor pulled me aside in the quiet corner, his white coat crisp, his expression grave. He explained Thaddeus needed more tests, his condition serious, but holding steady for now. Before leaving, he lowered his voice, glancing over his shoulder. "Be careful with the visitors. Today, 3 people asked about him who don't seem like family." My knees weakened, but I nodded, thanking him. Back in the room, a decision solidified in my chest, like hardening clay. "I can't keep hearing this in pieces," I told Thaddeus. "If you're going to talk, talk now. We don't know how much time we have." He looked at me with raw pain. He said finally, "There's something I never told you. That night before I disappeared, I buried a box under the old workshop where I worked. No one else knows. Inside are the originals, the documents proving all the embezzlement." My heart leapt, a wild thump. "Why didn't you use them?" "Because then you would have died," he replied, his eyes pleading. "But now that they've seen me surface, maybe silence doesn't make sense anymore." We stared at each other, the weight of that hanging between us. I realized his quiet hadn't just guarded me, it had shielded others too. Unaware souls caught in that web of corruption. "I want to go for that box," I said. "No," he shot back, sharp despite his weakness. "It's dangerous. More dangerous than waiting here. You sacrificed your life for me once. I won't let you do it alone again." He fell silent, then nodded with weary resignation. "In the back of the shop, behind a false shelf," he murmured. "Everything's there." That night, sleep evaded me. Every shadow in the hallway loomed like a threat. Every distant footstep, a warning. The next morning, I left the hospital with my heart pounding, hailing a taxi to the old workshop on the south side, now an almost abandoned warehouse, its air thick with old oil and dust. I walked slowly, breath held, the creak of the door echoing. I found the shelf, shifted boxes with dusty hands, felt along the wall until an irregular gap appeared. Digging with a rusty tool I found nearby, my palms sweating, I hit metal. The box was heavy as I pulled it free, opening it with the key he'd described. Sealed folders, thumb drives, contracts with real signatures, photos, recordings, enough to topple powerful names. Terror mixed with resolve. It wasn't just truth anymore. I held it in my hands. Leaving, I spotted a car half a block away, engine starting as I emerged. I walked without glancing back, ducking into a crowded corner store, watching from behind shelves. The car circled once, then vanished. The game was out in the open. I returned to the hospital, the box hidden in a plain shopping bag. Thaddeus waited, awake, his eyes searching mine. He knew without words. I nodded. "Now they're not just chasing us, they're chasing the truth," he said, sadly. "Let them try. This time, I don't plan to hide." In that moment, I knew I'd crossed a line. No longer the weeping woman finding her ex amid cans. I was the guardian of a truth that could shatter empires. And those who'd toyed with our lives, they weren't the only ones holding secrets anymore.
I returned to the hospital with the metal box pressed tight against my chest, as if it held something alive and breathing inside, something that could slip away if I loosened my grip. Every step felt heavier, not just from the fear of shadowed eyes following me, but from the sheer weight of what that box meant. Decades of lies woven tight, injustice layered like rust, a life shattered without me ever knowing the why. The taxi ride back had been a blur, the driver's radio chatter fading into white noise as I clutched the bag, my fingers aching. When I slipped into Thaddeus's room again, he gazed at me like someone who'd just returned from battle, his eyes searching my face for wounds. "I found it," I said, barely above a breath, sliding the bag under the bed where the shadows hid it best. His eyes welled up and he closed them for a few heartbeats, as if offering a silent prayer to whatever force had kept that secret buried all these years.
Then, with a voice like crumbling paper, "There's no turning back now." "There never was," I replied, pulling the chair closer, the scrape of its legs loud in the quiet. We sat there for hours without touching the box, just existing in the silence, the distant clatter of trays and muffled voices from the hall seeping in like reminders of the world outside. It was as if we needed to muster our strength, to brace for whatever storm those papers would unleash. Finally, with hands that shook despite my resolve, I opened it. Inside, folders labeled meticulously by years and dates, stamps faded but official, names I didn't recognize but Thaddeus did, his slight nod confirming each one. Photographs of half-built construction sites, maps dotted with red marks, payment lists that spiraled into absurd sums, and then the ones that stole my breath. Our own accounts, our properties, my signatures forged in a hand that mimicked mine too well. I saw documents where I appeared as debtor to impossible amounts, contracts tying my name to shell companies I'd never heard of, ghosts in the machine of their schemes. Everything crafted so that if scrutiny ever came, I'd look complicit, the guilty wife dragged down with her fallen husband. A wave of dizziness hit me so hard that I had to close my eyes, the room tilting. "All this, it fell on me after you left," I whispered, my fingers tracing the ink. "The debts, the seizures. I thought it was bad luck from your abandonment." "It wasn't abandonment," he said, his voice breaking like thin glass. "It was a sacrifice. And even so, it wasn't enough to protect you completely." The images unlocked buried memories, sharp as thorns. The day I was evicted, the movers avoiding my eyes as they carried out boxes smelling of our old life. The court notice slapped on the door like a judgment. The humiliation of borrowing from relatives who'd once admired our stability, their hesitant hands passing bills. Sleepless nights staring at ceilings, wondering how to pay debts I hadn't made. Years when I became a shadow, a burden whispered about. "I cleaned houses," I said, my throat burning with the words. "In my 50s, I went hungry some days, slept on borrowed sofas that smelled of other people's lives, and all the while, they were using my name to launder their filth." I squeezed a document between my fingers, the paper crinkling. "Why didn't you warn me, Thaddeus? Even if they'd killed me, at least I'd have died knowing." "No," he responded with a desperate edge, his hand reaching weakly for mine. "Because I still had one chip left, your ignorance. Every time they doubted my silence, I'd show a photo as proof the deal held. It kept you breathing." Tears fell onto the papers, smudging the ink slightly. "So my misery was part of their theater too?" "Yes," he nodded, his face crumpling. "So no one would dig deeper." For days after, I revisited each loss in my mind, the puzzle pieces snapping into place. Nothing had been random, no cruel twist of fate, no bad luck. I'd been maneuvered to the abyss's edge, pushed so the guilt's weight fell squarely on Thaddeus and me as collateral, the ruined wife no one pitied too long. I stumbled out of the room then, legs unsteady, and sat on a bench in the hallway, staring at my aged hands, stained from years of scrubbing, calloused from gripping too tight to survival. Now the why was clear. Someone had decreed my fault to shield their circle of thieves. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I opened the box alone in a small side room where no one ventured, the door clicking shut behind me, the air stale and still. I read document by document, following the dates like breadcrumbs through a dark forest. Names emerged that I'd heard on the news, surnames tied to towering corporations, politicians with polished smiles, men deemed respectable. Me, without knowing, a pawn in their giant web of corruption. They'd stolen more than Thaddeus's life. They'd pilfered mine, piece by hidden piece. At dawn, I returned to his room, the box tucked away. "I know everything I lost," I told him, my voice steadier. "Now, I want to know who took it." He pressed his lips in. "If we go to the end, there will be no forgiveness. Only blood in the courts. Many will fall. I don't want blind revenge. I want justice, with names and faces." He looked at me, a mix of pride and fear in his sunken eyes. That kind of justice kills slow. I've died slow for years. Now it's their turn to face the light without masks. From that day, I shed the skin of the wounded woman. I began calling quietly. The banks that had stonewalled me before, courts with their endless forms, old colleagues who'd turned away. I used snippets from the box as keys, unlocking doors that had slammed shut. Where once they dismissed me, now they listened in heavy silence, their pens pausing. I watched the gears turn. Some murmured it was impossible, others too late, a few that it was deadly. I know, I said each time. Dangers chased me my whole life unchosen. Now I choose it. Thaddeus worsened in those days, his body yielding to years of neglect, the monitors beeping erratic warnings. I'd watch him sleep, his face pale under the lights, thinking he might not see the end, and that thought squeezed my soul like a vice. One afternoon, his voice weak as fading wind, he took my hand. "If I don't see them fall," he whispered, "promise you won't stop." "I promise," I replied, tears warm on my skin. No one silences us this time. Outside, new faces appeared. Men in pressed suits lingering in lots, dark sedans idling too long, calls with no voice on the line, veiled warnings in the mail. The other side's pieces were shifting, but I wasn't alone anymore. Not the deceived shadow of before. Now I was the one who'd uncovered why her life was stolen. And when a woman grasps that, she grows dangerous. Not just surviving, but reclaiming every stolen year. I'd only just begun. The hospital room dimmed into semi-darkness as I returned from another day of hushed calls, tense meetings, silences thick with unease. Thaddeus slept restlessly, his chest heaving with effort, each breath pulling an invisible load. I sat beside him, the box's echoes still humming in my thoughts. Outside, the night felt too still for the explosion brewing. When he opened his eyes, he fixed me with gratitude laced with guilt. "They've started moving, haven't they?" he whispered, knowing without words. "Yes," I said. "They sense the documents are out." He closed his eyes wearily. "No easy escape then." "There never was," I told him. "But now it's not you alone against them." We lingered in quiet, then I leaned in. "There's more you haven't said, Thaddeus. I see it in your eyes. I need it all." His face tightened. For the first time since our reunion, true terror flashed there. "That's the one thing I shouldn't have shared. Once you know, no going back. No back since I saw you with those cans. Speak." He took long moments, then, voice shattered, dropped the words that iced my veins. "If I say the full names, they kill you." A punch to my gut. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he confirmed. "They're not mere corrupt suits. State people, officials, judges on payroll, the ones who vanish files and lives." A shiver crawled my spine. This dwarfed what I'd imagined. Not money alone, but raw, unyielding power.
That's why I agreed to fall, he continued, his words laced with the exhaustion of reliving it. Because when they laid your photo on that table and said it could all look like a mugging, a slip in the bath, I knew it wasn't my life on the line anymore. It was yours. My eyes brimmed with tears I couldn't hold back. "And I hated you for years," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Buried you alive in my heart, cursed your name in the quiet hours." "That hate kept me going," he replied softly, a faint smile touching his lips. "Knowing that as long as you despised me, you were safe, out of their reach." I covered my face with my hands, the past rewriting itself in brutal strokes inside me. Every flash of rage I'd nursed now twisted into something else, a painful, extreme act of love, disguised as betrayal to shield me. "Tell me the names," I insisted, lowering my hands, my voice steadier than I felt, "even if it ends me tomorrow." He shook his head slowly. "First, we secure the evidence. The box alone isn't enough.
They can torch traces, stage fires, assaults, accidents. We need the truth out in a way they can't bury it. How? I asked, leaning forward, the bed creaking under my shift. With the press, he murmured. Clean prosecutors. International eyes if we must. I drew a deep breath, the air sharp in my lungs. This wasn't a mere family wound anymore. It was a siege on a festering system. Then tell me about them, I said, even without names yet. Thaddeus closed his eyes, gathering himself, then pieced it out in fragments. A consortium of companies rigging bids like a fixed game. Millions diverted from public coffers, projects half-built and abandoned like skeletons in the sun. Officials signing off for envelopes slipped under tables, lawyers tasked with muzzling the restless. He spoke of an accountant found suicided in his garage, exhaust fumes thick. An engineer who fled after planted accusations stuck like tar. A councilman dead in a home mishap, his stare slick with unexplained oil. He all knew too much, he whispered, like me. And I, unknowingly, had been the leverage, the photo that bent him. That night, I left the hospital with a knot twisting in my chest, the corridor lights casting long shadows. I walked the sidewalk, every stranger a potential foe, the brush of a coat, a lingering glance. For the first time, fear felt physical, a chill in my bones, not just a whisper in my mind. Yet I didn't halt. The next day, I sought an old journalist I'd known vaguely from Thaddeus's circles, a man who'd chased big stories years back, his face lined like cracked leather from too many truths unearthed. We met in a quiet park bench, away from prying ears. The rustle of leaves our only company. I showed him just a sliver of the documents, enough to hook without endangering all. If this is real, he said, his voice gravelly, eyes widening behind thick glasses, more than one head will roll, and they might want yours first. They've wanted it before, only I didn't know. That afternoon, the first overt warning came. A folded paper slid under my rental door, the lock's click echoing as I entered. Leave the past where it is, or join it. My hands trembled unfolding it, but I didn't crumble. I returned to the hospital that night, the note burning a hole in my pocket. Thaddeus read my face instantly. They warned you, didn't they? I nodded. Yes, it's begun. Then the clock's against us, he said, his hand finding mine with surprising firmness. Listen close. If this turns sour, promise you'll save yourself, not me. No, I said without pause. You saved me once. Now we stand or fall together. His eyes filled with something unnameable, admiration, perhaps, or sorrow. That's stubbornness, always your strength and your peril. I managed a small smile, the first in days that didn't feel forced. In that instant, clarity hit like dawn light. They'd banked on my fear, my quiet, my breaking, but I wasn't that woman anymore, the one scrubbing floors, wondering why fate hated her. Now, I knew the architects of my ruin and exactly whom I faced. Before continuing though, oh child, tell me in the comments what you make of this tale so far and what you would do in my shoes. Don't wander off. What's next will chill you to the core. That same night, I resolved it firm. I wouldn't just cleanse Thaddeus's name. I'd unmask the whole net that snared our lives, even if it stripped my peace, my twilight years, my breath. Because this transcended justice. It honored a sacrifice buried in trash and despair. I'd make those God players quake. The journalist agreed to rendezvous in a discreet cafe, miles from the hospital, my home, anything traceable. I carried only a slim folder from the box, no risks. He arrived with a battered notebook, eyes of a man who'd glimpsed too many underbellies and paid dearly. Why risk my neck at 70? He asked bluntly, sipping black coffee that steamed faintly. I opened the folder, revealing 2 pages, an absurd transfer, a bid with forged scrawls. Color drained from his face. This is dynamite, he murmured, voice hushed. Where did come from? From a man forced to vanish, to save me.
He probed no further. Some truths don't fit cafe chatter. That afternoon, I updated Thaddeus, noting his pallor, the illness gnawing slow and cruel. "No turning now," he whispered. Never was. That night, as the city slumbered, the first strike landed. The journalist phoned, voice shaken. They ransacked my office, took nothing valuable, just files, left a note on my desk. I swallowed dry. What'd it say? "We warn once." Cold gripped my spine. They shadowed us close. I resolved to relocate it all to a tiny safety deposit in a rural bank, far from Power's web. We stashed encrypted copies there. He hid others undisclosed to me. I kept a sparse one as final guard. That week, a young DA consented to a confidential review. We met post-sunset in his office, blinds drawn, the desk lamp casting sharp shadows. He pored over names, sums, pacts. "If authentic," he said, brow furrowed, "this net spanned over 20 years. "It is," I affirmed. "My life's ruin hid it." He met my gaze gravely. "Then you're not chasing personal balm, you're prodding titans." "They prodded first." He nodded. "I'll guard this like kin." I departed trembling, not fear but the vertigo of motion. Yet foes slumbered not. 2 nights on, my rental door stood ajar. Inside, chaos. Drawers gutted, photos strewn like fallen leaves, valuables untouched, save one, our old wedding album, its leather worn from years. Message clear. "We know you. We know your heart." At dawn, I embraced Thaddeus wordless. He sensed it. "They'll strike where it stings," he whispered. "They have before. Nothing shatters me like then." But I fibbed. Fear for him could still fracture me. Days later, the near-fatal blow. Thaddeus plummeted. Fever spiking, breaths failing. ICU transfer urgent. The doctor spoke stark. "Next 48 hours decide." I sat outside all night, gaze on a blank wall, thinking he might miss their tumble, his offering unfinished. Guilt crushed like stone. Dawn brought the DA's call. "Raids today." "So soon?" "Delay, they erase all." "They're trying." Hours blurred. Snippets of news, terse calls, ops sinking. Offices stormed, servers snatched, suits summoned abrupt. Mid-afternoon, journalist messaged, "This explodes." And it did. That eve, first casualties public. Consortium head cuffed, manager fleeing, ex-official tossed by his party for face-saving. The nation buzzed, but counterpunch came. Exiting hospital, a man shoved me toward traffic. An accident too neat. An orderly tripped me backward, saving. The car grazed past. No room for slips. That night, by his unconscious side, I spoke as if he heard. "They can't hide. It's crumbling. Hold on." A tear traced my cheek. Next dawn, he stirred. "They live," voice faint, "alive and frantic." He smiled weak. "Worth it, then." I clasped his hand. Not done. 2 days on, DA summoned urgent. Heart racing, I entered. Trial evidence solid. Names, trails, tapes, the peaks. My legs quaked. Now or never. Precisely. Leaving, I knew our trash-born tale neared no return. We weren't victims lone. We cracked an empire's shell. That night to Thaddeus, they fall, all. He shut eyes peaceful, a serenity new. I can rest when time comes. "Don't say that," I pleaded. "Someone pays for righteous quiet too," he replied. I grasped then, this hadn't just altered a nation's tale, it reshaped a man's fate who'd forfeited all from my breath. His truth, soon etched indelible. Net, Thaddeus wept quiet. I hugged gentle, mind full of tubes. "We did it," I whispered, "after so long." But justice exacts tolls. That dawn he worsened, sudden, bleeding internal, alarms shrilling, doctors rushing with clipped orders. I waited outside emergency, hands pressed to chest, pleading a God I'd shunned years. Hours stretched, eternal. Doctor emerged, face grave. We tried all, but his body's too worn. World cleaved. I entered crooked steps. He lay wired, eyes shut. I took his hand, cool now. "You held truth till end," I whispered. "Now all know." He opened eyes last, gaze love-filled, unforgettable. "Worth it, barely. You're alive, no hate from me." Silent tear down his cheek. "Never hated," I said, fibbing for his peace. He passed smiling faint. His death, minor amid scandal's roar. For me, quake. I grieved private, far from lenses, speeches. Just me, his truth, stolen years' burden. Days later, burying him under gray skies, a prosecutor neared. Reparations coming, public sorry for his case. I eyed weary, won't return lost years, but maybe spares others. That night home alone, small light on, I sat bed's edge strengthless. Net fallen, guilty caged or fleeing, truth inked in papers. Justice here, but sustaining love gone. Yet I grasped, sought revenge, not humiliation, but truth upright. And that fulfilled. Funerals next day dawned thick gray, world mourning too. I woke empty house, silence no threat, but void. Years with resentment's din, fear, doubt, gone with Thaddeus. Bedbound, hands gazing, waiting clear feel, pain, relief, rage, slow, heavy mix. I wandered aimless, city pulsed indifferent to my savior's death. Folks hurrying, kids school-bound, vendors hawking, none knew my rib-caged saga cost to clear corruption-tarnished name. That day, DA's summon for closings. Somber room, DA, secretary, state rep. Coffee offered, declined. Case shut, DA said. Implicated processed, some convicted, others await. I nodded mute. State sets reparations for damages, he added. Public recognition for injustice to you both. Not throat tight. He missed those words. Weighs more than coin. DA gazed down. Debt unsettlable full. I signed steady, though not mind feeling. Accepted simple. Not me, but echo tangible for his offering, proving not all buried. Leaving, press swarm. Mics, cams, queries, stone-like. Field post all. Corruption thoughts. Forgive? Answered none. Walked high-headed. Thaddeus bore ruin silent. Wouldn't spectacle his tale. That night, home exhausted, table held senderless white envelope. Opened uneasy, lingering. Inside, folded sheet, lone hand scrawl. He won, you too. No threat, resentment, just late nod from one knowing hides gone. Tore, trashed, past barred from present touch. Days, scandal noise waned, headlines shifted, new villains spotlighted. Life flowed on. Mine altered. Sold poverty house, bought bright apartment, window park facing. No luxury craved, ostentation, just breath space, fear-free. Furnished sparse, table, chairs, books, ruin rescued photos, wedding one, us young, smiles true, gazed long, framed simple on dresser, not abandoning husband tribute, but self-sacrificers. Lived slow, savored morn coffee hot, sun window warm, plaza kids murmur. Years felt rolled owed, now owed peace alone. Month post-close, public act, reluctant, but DA urged not you, for history. Accepted. Courthouse hall grand, statement read. Thaddeus victim extortion large, used goat, life wrecked shielding illegals. His name full, ere chest broke. Invited front, slow steps, auditorium silent watched. DA handed resolution folder. State behalf, he said. Forgive late arrival. Took it, words lacked for damage, closure. That night, home tired heart, sat open window. Wind curtain, gentle. Thought women at his vanish. Rage, humiliation, hunger, hate propping.
vain none. Each tear, fall, night unanswered, led truth point. Price steep. Hurts pondering earlier no, different do. Then grasp illusion. Power theirs. Silence shield ours. He bore for me. One day, box review, last docs, found note folded twixt contracts. Old script, his. If read this, I'm gone. Recall not fallen man, but lover deceiving save. Losing you highest cost, saving soul win. Cried unchecked, months. Shameless, unrestrained, prideless. For was, couldn't, unlived. Time spoke him voice unbreaking, told story listeners, not tragedy, love extreme. Some hero called, said cornered man saving loved. At 67, restarted, not youth illusions, grand vows, but harder, valuable, truth. Today, fear-free walk, no back shadows, no hidden blow waits, no hate vanishing man, no why, no left life, gift ruin, pain, silence wrapped, greatest given. Thanks sacrifice, say serene, here alive, free, peace first many years. Today's sit apartment window, watch out life, struggle believed, survived. Hear park kids play, feel curtain slow sun, first many years, unafraid. No behind check, no door noise tremble, no cup suspect. Long lived abandoned think, loved man selfish destroyed, ruin coward fault. Opposite, he pain carried breathe I, lost his save mine unknowing. Lost years none return, hate, silence, hunger, humiliation. Alone believed years, today grasp shakes, all time, unknowing, someone freedom paid own sentence. No fall celebration, no prison happy, no defeated peace. True peace, truth no. Name cleared, not lie cruel, love. Today little live, calm, peace asleep, fearless walk, mourn thanks simple huge, alive. No why. At 67, no revenge seek. Silence, calm, honor sacrifice man carried all, I nothing. Honor living, fearless, resentless, chainless. Post pain, rest deserve. Did you like the story? Is the city listening? I wait for your comments below. Thumbs up for more stories. Thanks for your support. Don't forget to subscribe.